Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. As I make these videos, I come across so many interesting books, and I don't know which video it was where we looked at this book. It's called Church History and Modern Revelation, being a course of study for Melchizedek priesthood quorums. And at the bottom it says, published by the Council of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it was written by Joseph Fielding Smith. At this time, he was in the Quorum and the 12 Apostles. Although later on, of course, he became president of the church. This was published in 1949, intended for classes in 1950. And so I like to go back to these books and see if there's anything that I need for my spreadsheets, whether it's church manuals like this or the works of private individuals. There's so many good books and manuals out there that are just full of gems. And I pulled out, I think, 3 different quotes for various spreadsheets. And there's one in particular that I really like that has to do with signs of the times that should really shed a lot of light on the time that we're living in right now in 2026. This kind of blew my mind when I read this. So we're going to go in order. Okay. So we're going to skip down to lesson 127. It starts on page 43. And it's in the notes. Okay. The Savior, in one of his parables, when speaking of the end of the world, which is interpreted as the end of unrighteousness at the coming of the millennium, said, sorry, let me close this one over here, said, the Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity. Referring to this event, the prophet said, the men who hold the keys and others who were righteous are in heaven, but their children are on the earth. Their bowels yearn over us. God sends down men for this reason. It appears that the Lord sends angels to earth from time to time to help us to keep in the path of righteousness and from straying from his ordinances. We are now living in the last dispensation. The church will never again be taken from the earth through apostasy and transgression. Okay, so we're coming up on the first quote. These are a few different topics. So there's basically 3 quotes, 3 different topics. This is the first one. And what I'm about to read, I have put on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z, what's currently row 45 for apostasy church-wide. There are people out there that would have you believe that the church has fallen into apostasy, or that it's going to, that they or somebody in the future, some special figure is going to come along and correct the church. Usually these are charlatans, they're predators, they want to take you away from the church, form splinter groups, stuff like that. It has been said time and time and time again that there is not going to be another general apostasy of the church. So I've added this to that spreadsheet, but I haven't covered the whole quote that I copied to my spreadsheet. So the church will never again be taken from the earth through apostasy and transgression. The Lord will not permit this to occur. Even now, we can observe a tendency in parts of the church to introduce innovations and to make slight changes in procedure and discipline. This is what caught my interest. It was already a good quote, but I feel like I've seen this myself. I feel like I've seen it myself in various places at different times. So, for example, on my mission, I guess I didn't witness this myself, but I heard of another area where there was a ward, and just one Sunday, because there were no young men, the bishopric or the branch president or whatever had the young women passing the sacrament. I think it's because they were still young in the church, like it was a branch, I think, and they just didn't know how the church ran, how it operated. But there have been things like that. I heard of another time where I don't know if this is true, but I could believe that it's true. That again, in another area in the mission, there was a ward that had a lot of gypsies, and that, I don't know, the bishop or the stake president came in and said that their temple recommends are withdrawn by virtue not of being gypsies, but of the gypsy lifestyle. This is just rumor, so I don't know if that actually happened, but I do know that there are things that do happen in the church, where people may, maybe with good intent, take things into their own hands, or like it says here, they come up with innovations and slight changes that would actually go against church procedure, doctrine even. It's not hard to imagine, though, is it? Because this happens with any large organization. You always have people that want to change things. They want to rewrite the rules. They want to pattern the organization after themselves and how they think things should be. Again, maybe people have ulterior motives, and then other times maybe someone's trying to do something good, but they're just misguided. So, but the point is, he's talking about the fact that the Lord has a system in place to keep things in line. And essentially, it starts with the president of the church. That's the whole point. It's the same thing with the scriptures. This has been an ongoing theme throughout my channel. You have people that will point to the scriptures, and that's great. We learn a lot from the scriptures, but you know what the problem is? Is that you take any two people in this world, any two people in the church, and have them read the scriptures, and they're going to come away with different interpretations. So it helps when beyond the Bible, we have things like the Book of Mormon, we have Doctrine and Covenants, we have the Pearl of Great Price, because that helps narrow things down. But even then, you still have people that have different interpretations. And so the thing that really nails it in place is the president of the church and the quorum, the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 apostles, to authoritatively interpret the scriptures. Otherwise, everybody's just doing whatever the heck they want. Again, sometimes they're just literally doing what they want. They don't care. Other times it's well-meaning people, but they're going off on another path. So we got to have living prophets and apostles. But anyway, look at this. And maybe you've seen this yourself. He says, even now, we can observe a tendency in parts of the church to introduce innovations and to make slight changes in procedure and discipline. If it were not for the constant contact by the general authorities with the stakes and wards, we would find ourselves in a similar condition which prevailed following the days of the ancient apostles. Of course. I mean, that right there is the spirit of the great apostasy. Everybody just coming up with their own way. Okay, the Lord will not, however, permit the church to turn into forbidden paths or be governed by apostate groups. The prophet repeats the words of the Lord. And the Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that give offense, and them that do iniquity. To keep the church free from errors, all these authoritative characters will come down and join hand in hand in bringing about this work. Okay, now we're about to transition into a second topic and a second quote for my spreadsheets. It's for my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. I've actually added a new topic for that spreadsheet. I don't have a ton. It's not like my quotes A through Z. spreadsheet where I have like over 600 topics. The common misconception spreadsheet is for very specific misconceptions that have to do with the second coming. And I have a new topic and a new quote. All right, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain, excuse me, a grain of mustard seed. The mustard seed is small, but brings forth a large tree, and the fowls lodge in the branches. The fowls are the angels. Thus, angels come down, combine together to gather their children and gather them. We cannot be made perfect without them, nor they without us. When these things are done, the Son of Man will descend, the Ancient of Days sit. We may come to an innumerable company of angels, have communion with and receive instructions from them. Paul told about Moses' proceedings, spoke of the children of Israel being baptized. He knew this, and that all the ordinances and blessings were in the church. Okay, now, the horn, the little horn. This comes from the book of Daniel. This mysterious symbol in the book. So you'll remember that there were two ways that the kingdoms and empires of the world were depicted in the book of Daniel. You had King Nebuchadnezzar's dream where he saw a statue, and each body part, not each body part, but like the head, the torso, the thighs, the legs, the toes, they all represented different periods of history and the dominant power in the world at that time. So you had his dream, and then Daniel had a corresponding dream or vision where he saw the same thing, but instead of seeing a statue, he saw different beasts. And it's a timeline. And when he got to our day, the period after the Roman Empire, he saw 10 horns, and there was an 11th horn. And the 11th horn had a mouth, and it was speaking blasphemies against God, and it was persecuting the saints. And so when you go to these other Christian churches, I'm not saying all of them have this interpretation, but I know some do, especially I think evangelicals. They'll look at this symbol and they'll think, oh, this is a single person antichrist, like a final boss that has to appear before the second coming. When they read the scriptures that we associate with the great apostasy, they don't have the concept of the great apostasy. So they don't realize that it's Satan that's being spoken about in these scriptures. They think that there's a mortal man who's going to gain a lot of power and basically govern the earth. There's going to be some kind of financial system that you have to opt into if you're going to succeed, and you have to decide if you're going to take the mark of the beast and stuff like that. They take these scriptures not knowing what they mean. They think that it's a future person that still has to appear. We read the same scriptures and we know that it has to do with the Antichrist, Satan, the great apostasy. Unfortunately, some members of our church will listen to these other Christian people doing the best that they can to interpret the scriptures, but because they don't have living prophets, they don't know what they're reading sometimes. We know what these scriptures mean. So I'm going to read. The horn made war with the saints and overcame them until the Ancient of Days came. Judgment was given to the saints of the Most High from the Ancient of Days. The time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. This not only makes us ministers here, but in eternity. Daniel and John each saw the opposition the little horn made against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This opposition will continue until the Grand Council is held at Adam-ondi-Ahman. This little horn, quote unquote, and then he references Daniel chapter 7, the book of Revelation chapter 13, is making a renewed and determined effort today to destroy the church. In 1949, the little horn was in operation. It's not a future figure. This has to do with the great apostasy. It has to do with Satan and his forces as they fight against the church. And as far as fighting against the church in this dispensation, it began with the first vision. Before Joseph Smith had the first vision, where he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, he had an encounter with the man of sin, Satan. So I've taken this quote, like I said, and I put it on my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. So now I have a quote that deals specifically with the little horn. So the topic is Antichrist because, like I said, people are always trying to figure out the Antichrist. And they think that the little horn is the single mortal Antichrist that is yet to appear. By the way, I have other misconceptions here, like the man of sin. That's a title, a name, a description that's given in the scriptures. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And I have quotes talking about the fact that the man of sin is the adversary. In fact, there's a really interesting story from the early church. This was the Kirtland period, where Joseph Smith said that the man of sin was going to be revealed the next day. They were going to have this priesthood meeting. It was going to be the first one where anybody was ordained a high priest, aside from Joseph Smith. And there was an interesting story that took place. So we have it in History of the Church. We also have it from John Whitmer, one of the 8 witnesses. But anyway, so now I have a quote for the little horn. So let's continue. I'm actually going to skip forward and we're going to move on to this third and final quote and topic having to do with signs of the times. Okay, this is Joseph Smith. Men profess to prophesy. I will prophesy that the signs of the coming of the Son of Man are already commenced. Okay. This, not this part right here, but what I'm about to read is going to go with the idea that, we haven't seen anything yet. That's one of the misconceptions on my spreadsheet. These aren't the signs of time. These aren't the signs of the times. You haven't seen anything yet, is what people will say whenever we're looking at the most powerful explosions ever observed by modern science, the most powerful, whether in space or on Earth, both of which have happened as I've made this channel since 2021. We've literally seen the most powerful things ever measured with modern science. We have seen incredible, well, this was before my channel, but we've seen incredible earthquakes and tsunamis. We've seen crazy wildfires during my channel. AI has become a thing since I started my channel. I mean, they were already developing AI, but with AI chatbots, I had no idea. The first time that I saw, AI chatbots, I think the first one was ChatGPT. It was after I had started my channel. It wasn't until after my channel that it started becoming a regular thing and a tool that people use. Not to mention all the things that we've seen in the church. Anyway, okay, so Joseph Smith said, I will prophesy that the signs of the coming of the Son of Man are already commenced. One pestilence will desolate after another. We shall soon have war and bloodshed. The moon will be turned into blood. I testify of these things that the coming of the Son of Man is nigh, even at your doors. If our souls and our bodies are not looking forth for the coming of the Son of Man, and after we are dead, if we are not looking forth, we shall be among those who are calling for the rocks to fall upon them. That's a quote that I already have on my spreadsheets. I think it means two things. I think it means to watch yourself, make sure that you're prepared spiritually before Christ comes. but I think it also means looking for the signs of the times. And I think that if you're living righteously, you are looking for the signs of the times, and you're noticing them, and you're recognizing them. Okay, so that's the end of the quote from Joseph Smith. And then Joseph Fielding Smith says, some of the members of the church think they are too busy and that there are too many things to be done in this life for them to be bothering about the coming of the Son of Man. Isn't that true? We've talked about that a million times on the channel. The different reasons why people seem to not want to talk about the second coming, not want to think about it, dismiss the signs of the times, skip over certain topics when they're brought up. This is one of the reasons, and I've talked about this before. Some people, they like how their life is going, and they don't know how the second coming may interfere with that, bring it to an end potentially. And so you're just like, well, yeah, I don't want to think about that. Let me just focus on what I'm doing. Let me continue to accumulate wealth or status or fame, or I have this goal that I want to accomplish. So anyway, in a revelation given March 7th, 1831, the Lord said, and then it just gives signs of the times. It's scriptures that you've already read, but I want to go ahead and go up here. Okay. If the signs of the coming of our Lord were apparent in the days of the prophet, surely we have evidence today that the great day of his coming is drawing very near, for the signs have multiplied 1,000-fold. And that's it right there. 1949, Joseph Fielding Smith, from the time of what would Joseph Smith be to him? Like his great uncle? I'm not sure, but his grandfather was Hiram Smith, the brother of Joseph Smith. But from Joseph Smith to Joseph Fielding Smith, he's saying that the signs of the coming of the Lord have multiplied 1,000-fold. So from the 1840s to the 1940s. And now here we are, almost 100 years later, we're in 2026, and they've increased even more since that time. So I don't think he's giving like an actual measurement, but let's just go along with it. If the signs had increased 1,000-fold by 1949, they must have increased like 1,000,000-fold by now. Are you kidding me? The 1940s compared to now and everything that we've seen between that time. Now, World War II had just ended, right? But since that time, we've had so many other things. There have been many other wars. We've had recently the pandemic in just all of 2020 and how that affected the entire world. And I could go on and on. I have all the spreadsheets, but one thing that's just been incredible to me has been the wildfires. Not so much this year or last year, but we've seen some really crazy wildfires. And so many other things, chaos and confusion and AI. We've seen this very interesting war in Israel, what I believe is Israel's fourth existential war, which is kind of at a lull right now. Technically, the Iran war is separate from what happened in 2023, but I think they're actually connected, and that still hasn't fully resolved. So we'll see where that goes. But there have just been so many signs, and not all of it is natural disasters or signs in the heavens. Although we've had a lot of that, it also involves technology. Joseph Fielding Smith said a long time ago, he's like, look at airplanes, look at transportation, look at radio. And since that time, now we have the internet, and now we have AI and new technologies that are popping up. So I do think that at this point in 2026, the signs have multiplied a millionfold. I don't think that's an exaggeration. All right, continuing. The prophet continues his discourse and declares that the Lord had commanded the gathering of his people. And then it goes on, but this is where I want to end. I think that this is the proper perspective. So many times we have the mentality that we are the main character, that everything that we read in the scriptures is meant for us. It hasn't happened yet. It's for our viewing pleasure because we're the main character. We're the ones that experience the climax. And I think that we will. But we're not the only ones in the last days. This last dispensation began in 1820. And actually, I have a quote from President Hinckley. I should probably pull that up right now. Let's see. Yeah, I wanted to read a couple recent quotes about signs of the times. But right now, since I'm thinking about it, let's go to President Hinckley. And let's see. I don't know if it was that one. Yeah, I guess it was. So this is the October 2005 General Conference. And look what he includes as signs of the times. He says, the plague or Black Death of the 14th century took millions of lives. Other pandemic diseases, such as smallpox, have brought untold suffering and death through the centuries. In the year AD 79, the great city of Pompeii was destroyed when Mount Vesuvius erupted. And then he gives some more recent examples. But it's not just us. It's been going on since that time. I mean, with what he said, the year 79. So I think it's silly to think that we haven't seen anything yet, or that it's all just for us. Let me point out just a few other quotes here. So we have President Thomas S. Monson at this time, first counselor in the first presidency, April 2005 General Conference. He said, we cannot afford to be complacent. We live in perilous times. The signs are all around us. Then we have this from Elder Robert C. Oakes of the Presidency of the 70, that same General Conference. He said, our prophet regularly points out that these are the last days. We know from the signs of the times that the end is drawing near, and Satan knows it as well. Okay, now we have President Henry B. Eyring, April 2022, General Conference. And I'm just going to read this part down here. Anyone with eyes to see the signs of the times and ears to hear the words of the prophets knows that is true about the last days. We have President Nelson, April 2022 General Conference. We have never needed positive spiritual momentum more than we do now to counteract the speed with which evil and the darker signs of the times are intensifying. Positive spiritual momentum will keep us moving forward amid the fear and uncertainty created by pandemics, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and armed hostilities. I noted while in the middle of making another video that he included volcanic eruptions. And I think he did that because I think it was February of that year. We saw the largest explosion on Earth, the largest atmospheric explosion recorded by modern instruments. It was an underwater volcano off the coast of Tonga. It's still being studied. Not only was it the largest explosion on Earth that we've recorded, larger than the largest nuclear bomb, hydrogen bomb. Larger than that. That's how powerful this explosion was. Not only was it the most powerful explosion on Earth that we've recorded in modern times, but it also had the most lightning that's ever been witnessed. In the ash cloud, there's lightning. So I think that President Nelson took that as a sign. But he said that these are the darker signs of the times. I don't think you can say we haven't seen anything yet. And then President Oaks, this was January 11th, 2016, in a Deseret News article. He said, "We will need such spiritual strength in the coming days as we experience Satan's deadly onslaught on morality and the integrity of families, and as we read the prophecies and feel the signs of the times." So they're here. And I think they've increased 1,000,000-fold. I'm going to say that they've increased 1,000,000-fold since the time of Joseph Smith. The last thing I want to read, this is on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z, row 612 for Signs of the Times. And this is a good one to end on. This is from Elder Neil A. Maxwell of the Quorum of the 12, April 1984 General Conference. He said, "When the earlier coming of Jesus was imminent, signs abounded. Still, for some, there were doubtings, but the faithful prevailed and were vindicated. There were determined detractors, then, mocking the faith of believers, briefly creating a great uproar, even rejoicing over the seeming prospect that the faith of Christ's followers would be in vain. It was not. Members kept the faith, and the faith kept them. For today's spiritually attuned, the reassurances will be there." You guys, I would avoid listening to the determined detractors. And it's not always people that are outside of our church. There are people inside the church that want to detract from you seeing the signs of the times and seeing the things that are happening in the church, in the world, in the heavens, under the earth, so on and so forth. Do not listen to them. They may not have bad intentions, but it could be that they're not spiritually attuned, like we just read. They may not have a testimony. They may live a completely different life than you do. It may be a much more worldly life. Or maybe the thought of the second coming scares them, and so they don't want to talk about it. They don't want you to believe it, because then if they see you believing it, then it makes them more nervous. So just don't consume that kind of content. Stick with the faithful and trust what you're feeling and listen to the living prophet. And I've quoted prophet after prophet, apostle after apostle. That's who we should be listening to. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.